on the other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Ultimately, one thought reigns supreme in my mind in relation to Raya and the Last Dragon. It exists. As far as the end product is concerned, this is probably the film that has made the least impression on me out of all the theatrical CGI Disney releases. And no, I'm not counting Frozen 2, because even I was smart enough to skip that shit. The reason as to why it fails at making an impression is well documented, and my conclusion is hardly an original one. The film has a lot of ideas, brilliant ones even, but none of them are given the opportunity to truly flourish. I'm not the only YouTuber who has said such a thing. In fact, given that I took my sweet-ass time getting around to watching said movie, I'm probably the last one to do so. However, what I'm interested in is the why aspect. I've been recently inspired to hypothesize why this film may have turned out the way it did. The answer to me is quite simple. It is, on multiple levels, time.
You are now entering Diagnosis. Insanity.
Time is not the primary theme of the film. In fact, I don't believe the filmmakers ever took the concept into account when writing and storyboarding the movie. It is, however, a constant cloud that sits over every aspect of the production, with layers that go deeper and deeper, revealing darker secrets within. The first level relates to the narrative structure, and this is what most critics commonly take issue with. If you exclude the closing credits, Raya, the film, clocks in at around 1 hour and 35 minutes, and I'm sorry, but this type of story just does not lend itself to such a runtime. This film does have a lot of talent in it, and you can see it in almost every shot. It's pretty well directed, and all the story beats are there to make the overall result turn out well, but there's just no space between it. The world has a ton of world building crammed into it, and aesthetic-wise is stunningly directed. The concept of a world based on the body of a dragon, and each settlement embodying the core idea of the body part it's based on, mate, that's so cool. One small problem though, that pesky little number we're dealing with. Every establishing shot is cut short. Every design gets so little attention put on it that your mind forgets it instantly. Pausing the film at key moments reveals so many beautiful vistas and locales, many of which would make stunning pieces of art. And you can tell the designers went absolutely nuts on the aesthetic aspect. Unfortunately, you just don't get time to behold any of it. It brushes by as if it's a commodity to consume, instead of an artistic endeavor to internalize. Hold that thought for a bit though, because we'll come back to it later. The thing about animation, particularly high-budget animation, is that it serves a slightly different purpose to your traditional live-action film. I wouldn't necessarily call it spectacle, but there is a certain appreciation for high-quality animation that one feels, one that you just don't get from a traditional film. That's not to devalue actors, writers, and directors. Through other means in live-action, they can show the beauty in both the fantastical and that of the everyday, through passionate performances, multi-layered subtext, and powerful direction. However, with animation, regardless of whether you are portraying the grittiest dystopian future or the prettiest flower fields, there's a beauty to both what you're seeing and the understanding that passionate artists took time and care to make this happen. Raya, as a film, doesn't seem to respect that. I want to take in all the atmosphere, but the plot is constantly pushing itself into the next scene, and as such I find it difficult to recall any specific parts of the film in my mind. The same applies to the story itself. I can't call it original, in fact many YouTubers can't. The Avatar: The Last Airbender comparisons have been picked up by many people, right down to the honest trailer guys. That in itself isn't an issue though. Hell, the Avatar creators practically ripped themselves off with the creation of Dragon Prince, and that delivered a truly magnificent story. Imitation is considered by many to be the most sincere form of flattery, and honestly I'm perfectly okay with films quote-unquote stealing ideas, providing the end product is enjoyable. If good ideas get stolen and lead to the creation of more good ideas, everybody wins. One small problem though, that pesky little number again. Avatar: The Last Airbender had 3 whole seasons to tell its story, and a lot of that time was dedicated to slowly building the story up, giving the characters breathing room, expanding the scope of the world, and allowing each emotional beat to truly set in. With this blasted thing, there's no time for that. The setup works quite well, overly hip dialogue aside, but beyond that it feels very much like a sequence of events being checked off a list, as opposed to a genuine heartfelt story. It's not a completely awful story to be told, trying to move past trauma and learn to trust people again, but the way in which it's told feels like they've got the start, the climax, and the end, and they just kind of forgot everything in the middle. A story like this needs down moments to really build character relationships. I can see the basis of brilliant characters in each of the cast members, but without proper breathing room or slow development, they feel less like characters and more like caricatures. That's not to say they're bad by any means, aside from Seesaw, the most annoying talking animal I've seen in a long time. That's just to say their potential is squandered without proper groundwork to establish them. Furthermore, when the story is jumping from plot point to plot point to plot point to plot point, the end result is the world that it takes place in ends up feeling incredibly small. This is a grand fantasy tale, yet it ends up feeling like it's stuck in a limbo somewhere between Lord of the Rings and a small-scale heist film, which I don't believe was the intent of the filmmakers, to be honest. And look, I'm not saying the film should have been longer. Previous Disney 3D animated films have turned out extremely well, even with a diminutive length. The difference is they knew the kind of runtime they were given and wrote stories that accommodated said length. The problem with Raya is that the ideas behind it, whether original or not, are so uncompromising that it's led to this unwinnable state. But we'll leave that there for a moment, because below this whole kerfuffle, this runtime has caused other problems. Now, this segment wasn't quite an epiphany on my part, but I felt it was very relevant in the dive down the rabbit hole that is the issues of time within Raya, the film. This awesome dude actually pointed out one key issue. Opening up and forgiving those who've caused you trauma is an eventual step on the road to acceptance, provided enough time has passed and enough effort has been given from the abuser. This film just ain't got time for that shit, both within the confines of its world and in terms of the writing itself. Not to get too personal about things, but I'm dealing with similar traumatic shit right now. No, it's nothing as fantastical as this, just coming to terms with the fact that a familial figure has been verbally abusing me for the entirety of my life. Point is, this whole forgive the source of your trauma and trust again thing the movie does irks me on multiple levels. Effort on the, I wouldn't say abuser, but definitely the source of the trauma aside, time is required to establish the bonds. And that's if they're deserving of being re-established at all. As far as I can gather, this film's philosophy is incredibly naive, actively going out of its way to contradict itself. It constantly shows that most people only have selfish reasons at heart, but then pushes the idea that everyone should be forgiven and trusted. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's just not how the world works. I'm not going to trust the racist, sexist, and bigoted in many other ways former colleague for my first job with anything. He's a bastard, and for those who eventually do need trusting again, it needs time. But oh look, it's that pesky runtime again. What are we gonna do? See, in this instance, I don't think much rewriting would need to be done in order to fix it. Just make the antagonist more of a remorseful character who is willing to try and make things right, as opposed to a half-assed Zuko knockoff. Put Raya in a more of a flawed light, and bada bing, bada boom, problem solved. But maybe that's too nuanced for a Disney movie. Is what I would have said if Zootopia didn't exist. Again, this isn't an original idea that I came up with out of the blue, but I feel it's something that's super important and needs to be discussed more. The ins and outs of trauma are lessons that just aren't discussed in media enough. We need to open up discussion on mental health, especially in family films, as such normalizes a more understanding outlook. I'm not saying this film should have strived to be more than the artist wanted it to be, but if you're going to delve into ideas like this, at least fully commit to it. But again, maybe this particular idea would have worked if they'd been given the ample time, and, well, that leads into the final level. This is the point of no return, where art ceases to be art. This, dear fellows, is the home of the mouse. To your typical animation junkie, Raya's purpose is to be art, as most animation is meant to be. However, to the mouse, Raya is a consumerable, a commodity meant for consumption. Consume, consume, consume. Pay extra to watch it on Disney+. Fight the Covey-Wovey to go to cinemas, which, to be fair, is perfectly acceptable for Godzilla vs. Kong, but the point still stands. Raya isn't art for art's sake. Much like the story itself feels, Raya feels like a box checked so the investors can get their paycheck. Heaven forbid Disney not release another animated film at that certain time. Heaven forbid they somehow lose market dominance. The idea behind Raya could have worked amazingly if it had been given a longer runtime, if it had a full series to tell a story, but that was never going to be an option. Even increasing the runtime to 2 hours would never have been an option. Its entire point, at least to the higher-ups, was to put a film in the cinemas and draw revenue for that quarter. At least until the next Marvel film demolishes the box office. This was never going to be a series or a longer movie. Disney can't even keep DuckTales running longer than 3 seasons, and that was probably one of the best modern cartoons in the past decade. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. Go watch DuckTales, you dingus. The concept behind Raya and the Last Dragon, whether original or not, is an uncompromising one, and instead of sacrificing its identity to fit the mold, it cut pieces of itself out to try and squeeze through. There was just no way this film was going to be afforded a longer runtime, and once again, time is the heart of the problem. Disney may have infinite money, but animation is still time-consuming. With 2D animation, the mere act of drawing every frame with multiple cells drags the process out. Just look at Redline, nearly 7 years in production because it refused to compromise in any way. And sure, with 3D animation, the animation process itself is far easier, particularly with tools such as motion capture and existing libraries of animation assets. But people still have to model for hours and hours, even with all the advancements in geometry duplication to speed up the process. Texturing still needs to be calculated, and the rendering, dear god, the rendering. My April Fool's video was just a bunch of wiggly lines and it ended up taking a whole day just to export. Time is of the essence, and Disney ain't moving that release date. Raya may have been an artistic endeavor on the part of the designers, animators, and writers, but with the corporate bigwigs hampering what it could have been, who truly remains the author? I don't hate this film, and I don't even consider it bad, outside of Sue, because honestly, her, she is so f***ing annoying. I do, however, find it exceedingly mediocre in its own special way. Time exists at the heart of all the film's problems. The clock ticks, the investors push, the message gets muddled, the story's emotional center gets drained, and the very nature of art itself gets sliced into bite-sized pieces to be naught but consumed and forgotten about. Some kids may vividly and fondly remember the visuals as they grow older, especially to do with the locales, but the average viewer will likely consume this and move on to the next advertised hit new thing. The cycle repeats, and, in essence, time moves on. Point is, I got more emotional satisfaction from Kong vs. Godzilla. Also watch DuckTales!